This is my first time ever posting on the subreddit. I am a very private person, and so this is extremely rare for me to do. My father often reminds me of this story as he remembers it in vivid detail, as it was so profound to him that it has stuck with him to this day. I feel I have to share this story as I believe there are so many people who have experienced something similar to what I'm about to share with y'all today. When I was a boy, I've endured a lot of odd and strange things, but this one was by far the most frightening. This occurred during the early 90s in the years between 1993 and 1994, so I was about 3 or 4 years old. I only vaguely remember any of this, but my father every once in a while never fails to bring it up and reminds me there is more to this world than what we see with our eyes. To him, this happens as if it was yesterday. My father told me there was once a period of time when I was a child that I used to run out of my room in the dead of night to my parents' room where he and my mother were sleeping. I would burst into their room frantically screaming, "Daddy, Daddy, I'm seeing monsters. There's monsters in my room." My father, being a very religious, spiritual man and no stranger to seeing some weird shit growing up in his homeland of Africa, would take me by the hand and back into my room to show me that there was nothing there. He would turn on a light, say a prayer for good measure, and tell me everything is fine, but I would always refuse to go back to sleep in my room, and I would beg to stay in my parents' room for the remainder of the night until he obliged. The same scenario happened another 3 times, and on the last time, my father had finally had enough and took me back into my bedroom and decided to stay with me for the night to see what, if anything, was tormenting me like this. I ended up falling asleep not long afterwards, my childish brain probably assuming I was safe now that my father was staying with me. Only around 20 minutes had passed and my father first saw it. The light was on, and my father said he saw a huge black mass that reached to the ceiling, and it had a shape of a very tall man. He was in complete shock at first at this thing and actually tried to move suddenly. He immediately noticed his whole body was paralyzed, as if whatever it was had inflicted some sort of self-induced paralysis on him. The entity then turned around slowly and revealed where my father assumed his head was. 2 small bright red little lights which my father assumed were his eyes. My father was scared shitless, but shook it off, coming to realization that it was probably the horrible entity that was troubling me, his son. Anger then replaced fear, and my father with all of his will and might tried to break out of his paralyzed state when suddenly the entity turned again, walked out of the room, and it was extremely surreal. The most disturbing part of this was our rooms were all upstairs in our house. My father told me that when the entity left the room, he then heard the footsteps of the thing walking along the stairs with the creaking of the stairs and all. For some reason, that part of this story always gives me the chills. I have in my later life experienced some strange occurrences, but not of this magnitude. I have found that I have quite an active sixth sense. For example, I can tell a person's energy and tell whether they're a good or bad person, or having sharp instincts and intuition and find that when I heed them, positive things happen to me, and when I don't, negative things seem to follow. First off, this is a long story, so thanks to anyone that reads this. Any opinions is greatly appreciated. So last year, my landlord turned my house into an Airbnb and gave me weeks to move. So I moved into an apartment November 22nd that seemed to be great at first. Georgian house, open fireplace, large apartment, it was pretty sick. I didn't even see it at first as it was painted over, but the chimney breast had "help" written on the wall as it was bleeding through. I found out later why it was there, which I'll get to. So, first 2 months were great. I was in a long-distance relationship that was going very well. I had great friends. I loved the home. However, little by little, I started to feel tired all of the time and low mood and kind of bleak about life. I decided to get a cat on December 22nd. I figured it was being without a cat as I had lost mine a year before due to old age. The cat I got was terrified to go in my room and spent most of the time growling and afraid of me. She died 2 months after getting her. She suddenly started opening her mouth, breathing like she was suffocating. Rushed her to the vet, and she had chronic heart failure, and I had to put her to sleep. My mood continued to spiral. I felt depressed in a way that I've never felt before. I started to feel something touching my back. At first, every few days, then daily. Moods started to get worse and worse. Every night I felt like I had 1,000 peoples of grief washing over me. Sometimes it got so bad I'd have to go stand outside at 2 a.m. just to take a minute. Then my relationship broke down after a year and a half. I lost friends I had for decades, just suddenly. I eventually got another cat, May 23rd. He, too, would not go anywhere near my room. 2 months later, the cat was laid asleep in the same place the cat last died and suddenly hissed and ran across the room in a state of fear. He became completely disoriented and terrified and started breathing with his mouth open. Rushed him to the vets, and they had to put him to sleep. They had no idea what was wrong with him, but he was in a bad state of distress, and they said he was too ill to save because he was already old. My mood got so bad after that I started to feel suicidal for the first time in my life. I spent days crying, and finally, after months searching, I found a new place and I got the hell out of there. After moving out, I was so affected by the place, I contacted the old tenant and asked her if she experienced anything strange in there. She said straight away, yes. She said she moved and she was in a really happy relationship. First 2 months were great. After that, she started to feel really depressed and bleak. Started fighting with her boyfriend. They became violent towards each other, which they never had. He ended up losing his mind and writing help on the wall. She saw a figure outside the bathroom where the bedroom was and heard a woman's voice saying a name one day. She said they had friends around and arguments would break out, totally out of character. She said she felt like something was feeding on her energy, sucking the life out of her. That's exactly how I felt. I looked up the history, and it turns out the head of the city mental asylum in 1805 lived there back when abuse and torture was rife in asylums. I'm now a month out of there in a different city in a beautiful apartment, and I still don't feel right. I feel a deep sadness in me, constant negative thoughts, depression in a way I've never felt. I feel numb and unable to move from my experiences there. Although it was just feelings, I've never been so affected by a place. My ex was still calling me daily for the last couple of months, but even he's now stopped calling me for a week. It's like I'm repelling everyone since living there. Could anyone give me any insight to what they think may have happened, or what should I do now? Could it have been a dark entity, or is it still attached to me? I haven't felt anything touch my back since the day that I left, and my new apartment feels great, so I don't think it followed me, whatever it was. But I can't seem to feel like the person that I was before this, and I want to feel like me again instead of numb. Thanks so much, guys, for reading this, and any help would be so much appreciated, because I feel lost. My coworker and I were having a conversation about paranormal topics. At some point, he brought up the black-eyed kids, who are reported to be young, between 8 and 15-year-old kids who show up at your car or house and ask for a ride. They have no whites in their eyes, only black, like they were wearing special effect contact lenses. They will continue to knock and beg and say they need to call their mom or get taken somewhere. So after my coworker brings up the black-eyed kids, I say, "Oh man, you shouldn't have done that." "Why?" he asked. I said, "Now you're going to get a visit from them in 3 days. No bueno for you." He laughed it off. After the next couple of days, I taunted him with, "Just 2 more days. Just 1 more day until they come and visit you." Each time he laughed and said that I was full of crap. Then the last day I told him, "Today is the day." He actually seemed nervous a bit and tried to hide it. I was dying laughing inside because I finally got him. So I go home and do my normal stuff in the evening, and I get on my treadmill to walk and watch the episode of Friends on TV. The episode is near the end and maybe a minute before the credits roll, and the TV sort of does this scrambled signal, and there on the screen is an image of a young red-headed kid with freckles, zoomed in so the top of his head and below the neck is cut off. He's turned almost sideways on the screen, really more tilted, like if you tried to rotate the picture almost 30 degrees. His eyes are solid black with a sinister stare. I jumped on the side of the treadmill trying to figure out what is happening because it happened so quickly. I'm standing there frozen by this image as I realize what I'm looking at. A black-eyed kid. Then, the most hideous and hair-raising evil laugh fills the room. It was coming from the TV behind me, and it felt like it was coming out of the hallway too, outside the door. I was in panic and frozen. As a friend's dad used to say, "What the WTF?" The image was static, not moving, and I estimated it last about 10 seconds or so, then it just faded away. And here's the crazy part. Friends returned to the exact place it was before, like it all took place in some sort of time bubble or out of place in time. Friends ended and the credits rolled, and I'm still standing on the side of my treadmill, gripping the handles with my mouth agape and shaking because I talked about the black-eyed kids, and I was the one who got the visit. At work the next day, I tried telling my coworker how my joke had terribly backfired, but he still thought I was making it all up. I'm terrified right now to relate his story, but it needs to be told. I can't explain how that transmission was able to override the TV, or how it produced that laugh that I never want to hear again. So, beware if you try this at home. I, on the other hand, will never do it again. Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free, and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there, and remember to always be afraid of the dark.